Fatal feast. Few royal deaths are as humiliating as that of King Adolf Frederick of Sweden in 1771. His demise came not on the battlefield or through political intrigue, but at his dinner table. On Shrove Tuesday, he indulged in a massive feast that included lobster, sauerkraut, kippers, caviar, champagne, and countless servings of semla, a sweet bun filled with almond paste and cream. Historical accounts say he consumed 14 of these buns, washed down with bowls of hot milk. The excessive meal overwhelmed his digestive system, leading to fatal stomach problems and ultimately his death later that day. Because of this, he is often remembered as the king who ate himself to death, a legacy that eclipsed any political achievement and has remained one of the most embarrassing royal exits in history. Rider's End. King Louis III of France, who reigned from 879 to 882, met a death that was both sudden and humiliating despite his royal status. Historical records indicate that Louis III died as a result of a horseback accident, a common risk for medieval monarchs who were expected to lead troops personally into battle or hunt frequently. During one such ride, he reportedly fell from his horse, suffering severe injuries. The fall left him unable to recover, and he died shortly afterward. For a king whose role included commanding armies and upholding regal authority, dying from a simple riding accident was a starkly undignified end. This abrupt and unceremonious death overshadowed his political and military accomplishments, cementing his legacy as another royal whose life concluded embarrassingly outside the grandeur of palace or battlefield. Imperial downfall. Emperor Elagabalus, who ruled Rome from 218 to 222 AD, met a death both violent and humiliating. Known for his eccentric and decadent lifestyle, Elagabalus's behavior alienated the Roman Senate and the Praetorian Guard. His public displays of extravagance, sexual scandal, and disregard for traditional Roman customs provoked a deadly response. In 222 AD, members of the Praetorian Guard, tasked with protecting him, turned against him. They murdered him in his palace, reportedly strangling him with their hands or garrots. To add insult to injury, his body was dragged through the streets of Rome before being thrown into the Tiber River. The combination of betrayal by his own guards and the public humiliation of his corpse solidified his death as one of the most embarrassing and shocking endings among Roman emperors. Stag's Revenge. Emperor Basil I, founder of the Macedonian dynasty, met a death that was both sudden and tragic, highlighting the dangers of palace intrigue. In 886 AD, Basil died from a hunting accident, an activity that was common among Byzantine emperors but carried real risk. While hunting in the countryside, he reportedly fell from his horse. Some accounts suggest the fall was entirely accidental, while others imply possible foul play by political rivals who feared his growing power. The fall caused severe internal injuries, and despite any medical attention available at the time, he died shortly thereafter. Basil's death was particularly humiliating for a ruler who had risen from humble origins to the throne, as it ended his life abruptly in an uncontrolled, vulnerable moment rather than through battle or political maneuvering. Fiery demise. King Charles II of Navarre, also known as Charles the Bad, died in 1387 under circumstances that were as bizarre as they were horrifying, a death that reflected his notorious reputation. Despite being politically shrewd and often ruthless, his end was the result of a mundane yet fatal accident. Suffering from a fever, his doctor prescribed a bizarre treatment, wrapping the king from head to toe in a linen cloth soaked in brandy. The idea was to use the alcohol to cook the fever out of him. However, as a servant was stitching the cloth tightly around the king, they used a candle to burn off a loose thread. The flame from the candle immediately ignited the brandy-soaked cloth. Charles II, unable to free himself from the burning bandage, was severely burned. He lingered in agony for 12 days before finally succumbing to his injuries. The irony lies in the fact that a man whose life was filled with plotting, intrigue, and deadly political maneuvering met his end from a basic, everyday mishap, a death far removed from his calculated schemes and thus seen as embarrassingly ordinary for a king. Privy puncture. King Edmund Ironside, who ruled England briefly in 1016, met a death shrouded in both mystery and embarrassment. Despite earning his nickname Ironside for his fierce resistance against Danish invaders, his life ended suddenly and in a surprisingly mundane way. Historical sources suggest that Edmund died from a wound to the stomach, inflicted either by an assassin or possibly as a result of an accident. One persistent theory is that he was stabbed while relieving himself in a privy, making the location of his death particularly undignified for a king celebrated for his battlefield prowess. Regardless of whether it was assassination or accident, Edmund's end contrasts sharply with his reputation for strength and valor, turning his demise into one of the more humiliating deaths recorded in English royal history. Final relief. King George II, who reigned from 1727 to 1760, experienced one of the most unexpectedly humiliating royal deaths in British history. Unlike kings who perished in battle or from prolonged illness, George II died in a completely private and accidental manner. On October 25, 1760, while attending to his personal needs in his residence, he suffered a fatal aortic dissection. Reports suggest he may have been on the toilet at the time, making the circumstances particularly undignified for a monarch. The sudden nature of his death left no room for formal rituals or dignified final moments. Despite his long and politically significant reign, the simplicity and personal embarrassment of his passing overshadowed his accomplishments, and it remains one of the more awkward endings recorded for European royalty. Lampreys' curse. King Henry I, who ruled England from 1100 to 1135, died in a manner that has gone down in history as both bizarre and humiliating. Despite his reputation as a shrewd administrator and experienced ruler, his death came from a common domestic activity: eating. On December 1, 1135, Henry reportedly consumed a large quantity of lampreys, a type of eel-like fish considered a delicacy at the time. He was warned about overindulgence due to his age, but he ignored advice and ate excessively. Soon afterward, he fell ill and died, likely from food poisoning or complications related to overconsumption. For a king whose life was defined by political maneuvering and military campaigns, dying from simply overeating a favorite dish made his death particularly embarrassing and anticlimactic in the annals of English royalty. Jousting doom. King Henry II of France, who ruled from 1547 to 1559, died in one of the most humiliating and bizarre ways recorded for European royalty. During a jousting tournament held to celebrate a political alliance, Henry was struck in the eye by a splinter from his opponent's lance. The wound penetrated his brain, causing severe trauma. Despite medical attention from the best physicians of the time, the injury became infected, and Henry succumbed to his wounds 10 days later. The irony lies in the fact that the king, a powerful monarch and skilled military leader, was fatally injured not in battle, but during a ceremonial sporting event meant for entertainment and display of skill. This accident transformed what should have been a moment of royal pageantry into an embarrassing, fatal misadventure. Cursed bloodline. King Charles II of Spain, who reigned from 1665 to 1700, died after a lifetime of health struggles that were as humiliating as they were tragic. Known as El Hechizado, or the Bewitched, due to his severe physical and mental disabilities, Charles suffered from developmental issues caused by generations of Habsburg inbreeding. His health problems made him frail, prone to infections, and unable to perform basic tasks without assistance. Despite being a monarch, his death came quietly from complications related to his weak constitution, likely involving digestive or respiratory failure. The king's inability to govern effectively, or even care for himself, made his passing a stark contrast to the traditional image of regal power. His death underscored the tragic consequences of dynastic inbreeding, leaving him one of the most pitiable and humiliating figures in royal history. Vikings' curse. A victory celebration turned lethal. Sigurd the Mighty, a 9th century Norse Earl of Orkney, died in one of the most bizarre accidents recorded in Viking history. After defeating a local rival named Mile Bright, Sigurd had his enemy's head severed and tied to his saddle as a trophy. During his ride home, the head's teeth rubbed against Sigurd's leg, breaking the skin. The small wound quickly became infected. In an era without antiseptics or antibiotics, even minor injuries could turn deadly. Historical accounts suggest that the infection spread rapidly, leading to sepsis, a body-wide reaction to bacteria in the bloodstream. Within days, the victorious Earl was dead, killed not by battle but by the teeth of his slain foe. Fateful ball. A seemingly minor injury led to his death. Frederick, heir to King George II of Great Britain, died in 1751 after suffering complications from a chest injury. Accounts report that during a cricket match, or possibly from being struck by a tennis ball, Frederick developed severe chest pain. At first, it was dismissed as a bruise. Over the following weeks, his condition worsened with breathing difficulties and fever. Physicians later described a burst abscess in his lung, which likely developed into pneumonia or pleurisy, an infection of the lung lining. Without antibiotics or surgical drainage, the infection spread rapidly and filled his chest with fluid. The heir to the throne, only 44 years old, died of a preventable complication from what began as a simple sports injury.